The Liberal Democrats could face losing more than half their seats. Well, I spoke to Nick Clegg on Friday about the future of his party, his role within it, and the Wizard of Oz. Well, Mr. Clegg, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's compare and contrast the campaign with 2010. And are you frustrated that the Liberal Democrats as a party are not really cutting through at all this time?
Well, I would be if that characterisation was fair. And actually, I think what is happening is, of course, for all the political parties, nothing is much as sort of moving in the national opinion polls. But these national opinion sort of snapshots don't really tell you what's going on in the communities and in the constituencies and the villages and the towns and the cities where elections are being ferociously fought between the political parties. And there, I think, there's really quite a lot of movement, actually, and far from being downhearted, I'm actually buoyed up, because my experience, and that's certainly what we're feeling across the country, is that where we get our message across, I don't whinge about it, but no one tells our story for us. We have to do it for ourselves. Where we do that, in communities where we are present in people's lives, we're getting a really good reception.
But what about, I mean, personally, don't you think back 5 years and you look at things like this, Millie fandom, and think 5 years ago that was me. I was more popular than Winston Churchill, according to one of the polls, and now I'm about as popular as Katie Hopkins.
That's a new comparison. I didn't think then, and I don't think now, you should ever go into politics if what you're interested in is some sort of beauty contest. I know it sounds a bit po-faced, but I genuinely think that you should go into politics if you've got ideas and values that you really believe in, and if you want to try and do the right thing for your country. And look, politics is a rough old business. You shouldn't go into it if you want everyone to just throw you bouquets and compliments, and particularly, and this is not just here in the United Kingdom, but across the developed world in the wake of the terrible crash in 2008, anyone in government has had to take some really difficult decisions, and that courts controversy and courts unpopularity. Right, but I mean, do I think it was the right thing for us to step up to the plate 5 years ago? You better. In fact, I feel that more now than I even did then, because I can now see we did the right thing for the country.
Now, you're very frankly talking about coalition. I remember talking to your predecessors as leader in general elections beforehand. Well, we always had to preface it with, well, no, our aim is to take over all power. And you say, well, no, you're the Liberal Democrats, that's not going to happen. So you're talking about coalition again. And I want to take you back to that manifesto launch when you talked, very interestingly, a kind of Wizard of Oz analogy, when you talked about bringing a heart to the Conservatives and a brain to the Labour Party. Now, heart to the Conservatives, aren't you meant to have been doing that for the last 5 years? And brain for the Labour Party. Are you saying they're a bit thick?
I think they have lost their head when it comes to the economy.
But they're stupid.
Well, I think actually when it comes to their absolute boneheaded refusal to apologise for presiding over a crashed economy, when they don't apologise for the fact that they left no money, as Liam Byrne's note finally said. They've blamed us for every single decision that we've taken to try and clear up the mess. Yeah, I think I am entitled to say, after 5 years of constant bile from the Labour Party, who have condemned us vitriolically for taking decisions which we only had to take because we had to clear up the mess they left behind, I think it is right to say that if we were ever in coalition with the Labour Party, we would make sure that that Labour Party wouldn't mess things up again and wouldn't waste people's money.
It sounds a bit personal. Sounds like, we know personality.
It's not personal.
Well, you're very angry, aren't you?
I'm really angry, actually, that the Labour Party, who presided over the biggest economic crash, certainly since the oil crash in the early 1970s, arguably in the Second World War, which has cost millions of people, a real kind of hit to their livelihoods, that they should sort of now refuse to accept any responsibility for what happened in 2008, not apologise. I've had to apologise for things I haven't been able to do. Have you heard even a hint of an apology from Ed Balls or Ed Miliband? They were in the government that promised an end to boom and bust, and they still don't apologise. So all I'm saying is, yes, you bet, we would provide the economic brain that the Labour Party appear to have left behind.
But does this feed into any coalition negotiations? We know you've selected your team. I presume early contacts have taken place.
No.
Does this then mean, OK, they haven't taken place, but when they do take place, if they do take place with the Labour Party, is this one of the preconditions? Apologise and accept what you did?
Well, listen, they're going to have to decide whether they apologise or not. I can't really force them on that. What I can do, and what I can say, and that is reflected in the first line of our top priority on the front page of our manifesto, is that the Liberal Democrats will balance the books, because you've got to balance the books, because this is what Labour doesn't appear to understand. There's nothing remotely progressive or fair in saying that our kids or our grandkids should pick up the price of this generation's mistakes, should pick up the tab for the mistakes of the bankers. What's fair about that?
You characterise it in these Wizard of Oz terms. So you've got the heartless Tin Man, the Conservatives, the brainless Scarecrow from the Labour Party. Of course, there were two others on that yellow brick road. There was Dorothy, who it turned out was having some kind of hallucinogenic dream, and the Lion that had no courage. Well, which one is the Liberal Democrats?
We're a lion with courage. Yeah, there you go. A slight adaptation to the story.
You're not the Wizard of Oz then, pretending to be more powerful than you are.
No. But look, listen. Joking aside, I do actually think politics, much as in life, is a bit of a balance between head and heart. Of course it is. And that's what we face as a country. The big question in this election campaign is how, we're tantalisingly close to wiping the slate clean for the next generation, to sort of free them of the debts of this generation. So why on earth would you string it out like the Labour Party wanted? They actually want more years of austerity than we do. We say let's bring austerity to an end in 2017-18, but bring it to an end fairly.
Well, let's examine in more detail who and how you could work with. Now, I mean, first of all, is it your ambition as the Liberal Democrats to go into a formal coalition? You're activists and you will have heard them say, well, we need time out of government to refresh. We may have an influence on the country, depending on the way the cards fall, and we can vote accordingly, but perhaps we don't need to be back formally in government.
Of course, we can have that debate, but do I think for the country? And I'll come to the Liberal Democrats in a minute, but I do think it's. I know it's an unfashionable thing to say, but it is worth sometimes to put your country before party. Do I think it is better for the country to have a government that can actually govern? Well, of course I do. This is the problem with all these exotic other arrangements, deals, pacts, confidence supply, and all the rest of it. They're all deeply unstable. And what they actually amount to is basically saying, in the case of the sort of left-wing alliance, well, you put Ed Miliband rather haplessly into number 10 without a majority, and Alex Salmond basically decides whether the life support system is switched on or off. And the other scenario is you put David Cameron rather haplessly into number 10 at the beck and call of Nigel Farage. I think both those scenarios are a absolute nightmare, because you'd have night after night after night of unstable votes in the House of Commons. No one would know exactly what the government is doing. I think we've proved, despite all the scepticism that greeted the creation of this coalition 5 years ago, we've proved that coalition government can work, can stay the course, and can be effective.
So would you have failed, Mr. Clegg, if you don't get into government, if you don't get your party into government? Would you stay on as leader?
Look, I've got bags of energy. I'm really optimistic about the prospects of the Liberal Democrats. Of course I want to continue to serve my country and serve the party which I'm so proud to have served for 7-8 years now. And of course the more Liberal Democrat MPs that are elected, the greater the likelihood that our country can continue to be governed.
But if you go back into opposition, would you stand down?
Look, I want to carry on leading my party, and I want to lead the Liberal Democrats into Parliament first, with a sizable, good, significant number of Liberal Democrat MPs, far in excess.
That's about winning your own seat. OK, we won't examine that.
Well, I'll do that.
OK, but if you are in opposition, and that's out of your hands, really. That's in the electorate's hands, of course, and there could be an outright majority, there could be a different coalition that leaves the Lib Dems out. Would you see any point in staying on, leading the Lib Dems?
Look, I want to lead the Liberal Democrats into and through the next Parliament, in all circumstances. It's one of the greatest privileges of my political life. At some point, of course, all political careers come to an end at some point. They will come to an end, and other people will come forward. But all I'm focused on at the moment is sounding the alarm about the very, very real risk that as the Labour Party and the Conservative Party vacate the centre ground and hair off in one direction after another, as opposed to another, there's a very, very real risk that we undo all the sacrifices and hard work that has gone in the last 5 years to put the country back on track economically.
Now, we talk about political careers ending. Well, we know Mr. Cameron's political career could be ending, well, pretty soon if he loses, or in a few years' time. He's told us that.
Yeah.
We never really found out how the coalition ended. What was your relationship like with Mr. Cameron when you said goodbye to each other? What happened there?
I mean, straightforward, professional handshake.
Well, we know how close you were when it all started. So a handshake, that was it. You went into came into your office. What happened?
Look, I think I'll do something unusual in an election campaign. I'll give credit to another party leader. I give credit to David Cameron that he and I put our party differences aside for the benefit of the country as a whole. I strongly disagree with a lot of the things that David Cameron and George Osborne wanted to do if they were on their own, and have now declared they would do if they were on their own, particularly their very unfair approach to balancing the books on the backs of the working age poor and not asking anything more of the very wealthiest in society as we continue to balance the books.
So you could work with Mr Cameron again?
Look, I've been very open about the fact. I'd love to sit here and tell you in the time-honoured fashion that I think I'm going to be Prime Minister. I'm not going to pretend I am. Alas, I don't think that's an impending likelihood. I actually, as it happens, don't think that David Cameron or Ed Miliband are going to be Prime Ministers in their own right either. They won't admit that to you. So the question is not really, is Ed Miliband or David Cameron going to be number 10? One of them will do. It's who is going to be there alongside them. And I just shudder at the thought of Ed Miliband basically in Alex Salmond's pocket, or David Cameron basically being held hostage by the right wing of his own party in Nigel Farage. I just think it's a lot better for the country. Never mind the Lib Dems. It's much better for the country that we continue to anchor the country in the centre ground.
What about voting reform? Very dear, of course, to the Liberal Democrats. Would that be back on the table with anyone you talk to about a coalition?
Look, I would dearly like to see voting reform, and I think in this election campaign, if anyone needed any confirmation of how lopsided our election arrangement is, just look at the vast swathes of the country where politicians are barely bothering to talk to voters because there isn't a meaningful contest in a whole bunch of constituencies, and all of us are only devoting our attention to actually a relatively small number of constituencies. It's just not a fair, balanced system. So of course I'd like to make the case, but I have to acknowledge we put this to a referendum back in 2011. It wasn't successful, and I'm not like Nicola Sturgeon. You know, I'd love to have that referendum to have gone the other way, but I'm not like the SNP, who basically then say that because they didn't get the right answer the first time, they're going to ask people over and over and over and over again every second Tuesday before they get the right answer.
Last question about the nature of the campaign. You talked about for the Lib Dems, you're fighting street by street, house by house, certainly constituency by constituency. Those are the sort of skills that would suit a seasoned campaigner like Lord Rennard. Is he involved in any way, shape or form with any element of the Lib Dem campaign?
Well, he's absolutely not in any shape or form providing advice to me in terms of the campaign. No, not to me.
But is he even putting leaflets through doors?
It's a free country, and he's a Liberal Democrat, and of course he's perfectly entitled to do whatever he wishes in his own time. But in terms of he has no.
But I mean, presumably you know all the fuss that there was about him. Do you know if he's working for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, I assume he is a Liberal Democrat peer. So, but that's dare I say it? I don't know what the 45,000 odd Liberal Democrat members are doing in every part of the country. I do know who I have asked to provide a formal role in formal positions in our election campaign, and Lord Rennard does not count amongst those people.
So he's not at the centre, but he could be working on a constituency basis.
It's a free country, and he's a Liberal Democrat peer, so he's entirely free to do what he wishes with his own time, but he is not in any formal capacity providing advice to me about how to run the election campaign.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick Clegg there talking to me on Friday. Well, our political editor Faisal Islam joined